Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great episode of Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host. The show is also known as PWD Allies Podcast. Check it out on your favorite app, Spotify or your app store, wherever you find it best when you're on the go and you listen to the show while you're on the road or, I don't know, riding your bike or, I don't know, whatever you may be doing. But hey, it's always great to have great guests on the show, and today is just another one of them. Today is Cathy McMillan from Dyslexia BC joining me. Hello, Cathy. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Brent.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great pleasure having you on. And today we're going to be talking about people with dyslexia and ADHD and etc. And we're going to dive right into the show. So anyone joining us today, I have Cathy McMillan joining me from Dyslexia BC, and we're going to be talking all about people with disabilities. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks again for having me.
Great. So, Cathy, well, I guess first off is, how did you get involved with Dyslexia BC? How did Dyslexia BC form?
I am the founding member of Dyslexia BC, and I am dyslexic myself, and I am the parent of two dyslexic adult children. I can't say kids anymore because they're 26 and 22. And my youngest has severe dyslexia. So dyslexia comes in a range from mild to profound, and she is on the spectrum of having severe, so not quite profound but fairly severe. And it's been a struggle to get her through the school system, even though now she's on the honor roll and getting an academic scholarship at the University of Victoria. So she's doing very well.
Awesome.
But my struggles getting her through the school system brought back memories of when I was in the school system with probably mild to moderate dyslexia and not being diagnosed, and being told to try harder, to work harder, lots of things that, I look back on, and things could have been so different if both my young adult children did well in post-secondary school, because they were identified as having dyslexia early and were given the proper supports to get them through school. So they did really well in school. My son graduated from UBC as well on the honor roll. So it just goes to show, when people are supported and their disability is recognized, they can do quite well. There's a huge problem when the system doesn't recognize the disability, and that's not really a problem, or whatever else they say about dyslexia, because it happens a lot. Dyslexia is in K-12, it's recognized as a disability under the umbrella term learning disability. We have our own designation category, just like autism. Yet they get zero funding for having the
Oh,
designation of learning disability, and autism gets $23,000. So
mhm,
that funding doesn't directly go to the child with autism, but it is extra supplemental funding that's given to a school in order to help pay for special education resources.
mhm,
So right away, the schools basically don't consider dyslexia a big deal because they get no supplemental special needs funding for it. They're
mhm.
they're lumped into the base amount of funding the schools are expected to provide based on the base amount of funding. So, without money, there's it creates a picture that dyslexia isn't really a big deal.
Mhm. Yeah, you basically nailed it right there with, not having all the supports in place to actually help the actual student to succeed to the, what, the best that they can. Um, but otherwise it's a stumbling block. Like if you cut the funding or you don't provide the funding to make the student succeed, then what do you have? I mean,
Yeah.
you're giving one sector of persons with disabilities in the school system. I mean, like you mentioned, autism, given the money to the school board. But what about people with dyslexia? I mean, what they need that help too. I mean, it should be equalized across. It's like pegging. It's like the government pegs one disabled sector against the other sector, say have and have nots,
Yeah,
and it's just wrong.
We talk about that
exactly.
all the time, right? And
Yeah.
just yesterday's podcast too, we were talking about cherry picking, and
Hmm.
and you know, I have I don't know if you know about this about me, Cathy, but I myself have submitted for at least four different human rights tribunal cases against the Ministry of Social Development here in BC, and like my thing, like, and I really tried to spell it out really carefully this time, is this whole idea of cherry picking, that the entire social assistance system is set up
Hmm.
like you can have this but you can't, you can have this but you can't, you can have this but you can't. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's called the PWD social assistance. That means that everybody on PWD that has a disability should
Hmm.
have the same
Same.
equal access to everything. And it's like, well, no,
Yeah.
you can have subsidized housing and you can't. You can have this but you can't. And it's just like, are you kidding me? And that's cherry picking, and cherry picking is discriminatory.
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and I've been saying that for like my thing has been going on. My clawback for the survivors pension has been going on for 10 and a half years now. I've been
Yeah.
saying the
Decade.
exact I've been saying the exact same thing for 10 and a half years, and I keep trying to find new creative ways of saying it.
Mhm.
We always say now about the pink unicorns. Turning everything into a pink unicorn.
Oh, like the one behind me.
Yeah, like the one behind you. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, all that kind of stuff really irritates me. Of like, why can't we just talk about truth and make sure that we have all the policies that are actually fair and not discriminatory, so that if you have a disability, and everybody that's on PWD assistance does have a medically assessed disability, so why are they do they have policies saying that you know Joe Blow can have an RGI or like some sort of subsidized rent, but
Right.
like a guy that just had his wife die, I'm sorry, you deserve a clawback. We're not gonna subsidize your mortgage or your rent in any way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, as we get older, we get more disabilities, and we need to take care of the disabled population also, even when they're young, when they're going through the education system. If they're aging out of care, if they're in foster care or foster parents, and then when they age out of care, they're youths, and then they transition out onto regular disability programs. But we need to, as Cathy had mentioned, Cathy, I mean, having the supports in place to every person with a disability. I mean, and especially with dyslexia, and it's not, the government's not recognizing that as well. I mean, and they should recognize it as a person with disability, that they need to have those supports, because like I really worry as the population ages, if these programs and these supports are not put in place now when they become seniors. Oh my gosh, there's going to be a big problems too. Just speaking of that, I'm just going to quickly mention something. I was reading something this morning that seniors, apparently they're getting a $430 top up, a one-time top up, and $110 a month to help them, because they're struggling with the high cost of rent for seniors. Now, I want to have that pushed over for people with disabilities, because the same costs are there, and even more when you have a disability, because you need all the adaptive supports that go along with it. So, yeah, I just want to throw that little blurb from there.
That's more cherry picking, isn't it?
Again, I mean, because there are seniors who have disabilities, right? I mean, they don't go away. I mean, magically, unicorns, they might, but.
Exactly. Dyslexic children become dyslexic adults, and the government literally thinks that dyslexia is only a problem in schools. And I'm helping a client right now with WCB, and he's over 50. He's had an accident. They've told him he needs to go back to school to retrain. Well, he has dyslexia, but he doesn't have a diagnosis like work. So at school, when you want to get your accommodations, you need a ticket, like you need that diagnosis, which costs $4,000. So with dyslexia, you can't just go to a GP and get diagnosed. You have to go to a special educational psychologist, and it's not covered by MSP. So this poor person has been struggling with ICBC tests. I've had a couple adults come to me. They had trouble getting their accommodations for not just the regular driver's test, but the next level for a commercial, I guess, driving a truck. I don't know what level it is. A couple of years ago, I helped a gentleman get his accommodations without a diagnosis but again, it wasn't just a simple task. I had to get a university professor to help me, and we wrote letters and basically said he needs the test read to him, and he needs to have the chance to speak his answer, like an oral exam rather than a written exam, because dyslexia affects reading and writing. And I mean, certainly his reading and writing shouldn't have any effect on his ability to drive a truck, right? So, why not give him the accommodations he needs, right? So we're just thought of really as not having a disability, and it's not fair.
I was going to say it's one of those hidden disabilities, right?
It's an invisible disability, and the fact that there's no money anywhere proves it, right? That nobody thinks it's a big deal. So then it becomes a huge problem for someone, like my daughter, who grows up or is in foster care or something like that. Can you imagine a foster care kid wanting to go to university and having to pay $4,000 just like, it's sort of discounted as a rich person's problem, because only the people that are getting diagnosed with dyslexia, most of them come from money, because the school system is so tight with those psychoeducational assessments that not everybody is getting diagnosed. Dyslexia affects 1 in 5, so up to 20% of the population. And in BC schools, only about 3% are getting reported to the ministry as having a learning disability. So, and of that 3%, I would say at least half or more than half of the diagnosis are private. So the government's only diagnosing about 1.5 for free within the school system. And then once you get out of the school system, there's nowhere to go for a free assessment. So you don't, like, for instance, for the gentleman taking the ICBC exam, I have proposed to the government like having centers where you could just get a dyslexia screener. Like a short screener, like it wouldn't be a full diagnosis, but at least something, so that when you write your TDG exam or your WMIS exam, all those trades exams, you could just have this sort of, yes, I do have a reading and writing problem. Maybe it's not a diagnosis. I need some accommodations, and then maybe save that $4,000 test for when you go to university, some of those bigger post-secondary institutions. But that screener could be used on job sites, or just like something that's not that expensive.
Yeah, and just before we launched the show, I mentioned that I didn't know if it was because of my cerebral palsy or not, but there was a short time in my life, and I forget how old I was. I think I was like maybe 8 or 9 or 7 or 8 or somewhere in there. And there was a short period of a few months. It was just a few months where I would see things backwards, but not all the time. I would just reverse some things, and I would look at some things, and some things are completely backwards, and then I would look again and it would be fine. But it was anyway, it was only a situation of a few months, and then it seemed to auto correct itself somehow. I don't know how. But it was one of those things that, like, if you're a kid and you're experiencing things like, wow, these are backwards now, and now they're fine, now they're backwards now, and it's hard for kids, I can imagine. Like, like I remember it being hard for me. Like I would look at it and go, well, that looks backwards, and then you would look again and it would be fine, and it was very discombobulated. It's like, wow.
Well, that's one thing that I learned too, when I was mentioning it before the show started, and I figure it was an isolated thing, and it's just something that I've always had all my life, but there were certain things that kept standing out, and I was going through college at the time, Cathy, and of course I was born with a visual impairment. I was actually born like legally blind, had an operation, and it left me with my condition, but it kept it stable. But in order to keep my vision so that I can actually see in general things around me, I still have great difficulty reading very, very small print, even with corrective lenses. But it's left me with that disability. So I was going through college, and we had to do videographies about ourselves and talk to the class. And actually, first it was one-on-one, and the class got to grade you on your video. And that's how I kind of basically built up my self-confidence of, hey, yeah, it's okay to talk about yourself to other people. It's okay to be you. And that's what the course was all about, is it's okay to be you and talk about your disability. But while I was going through that program, there was some testing that, like, there was another course that I wanted to do. So I was kind of working with that at the same time, and I was stumbling. I had a stumbling block, and why can't I do this? And my mind kept saying, no, Brent, you can do this. And teachers, instructors kept saying, Brent, if you put your mind to it, you can do it. You can do it. It was something I just couldn't do. And so they realized, okay, there's an issue going on. Why don't we put you through some other testing while you're going through college doing this other program? So I did. And what it came out was, Brent, you have a learning disability. You're having great difficulty with the same thing what we were just talking about. Like, there was numbers that were this way, and I was seeing it this way, and I was not able to seem to be fast enough on understanding of the concept of, well, if you do it this way, it's easier, but if you're doing it the harder way. But the mind actually says it's okay to do it this way. And so I had to talk to the class and bring it forward. I found it very, for me, it was hard, but the class welcomed me, and my instructor welcomed me. It's okay, Brent, to talk about these things. And as time went on, that's where I am now. Like, I I bring people together to talk about these things, and it's okay to talk about, and but also try to find solutions.
Now you're in front of the class every single week.
I am. And you know, and having Cathy talking about you know, your children that have dyslexia, and bringing the awareness of you know, all the inequalities of the school system, of why dyslexia, why the funding isn't there, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it does carry on into the workplace, right?
it
Like,
does.
I worked in consulting engineering, and guess what they do once a week? They write reports, right? Like they're when you're a consultant, you usually do quick jobs. It's not a long-term job, usually. Um, and that's like a nightmare for a dyslexic person to have to produce something all the time like that. So eventually I went to my boss and I said, I think I've got dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is what I'm really good at. I'm really good at organizing people, communicating, um, because I would go on sites and be in charge of contractors, and I would help train people. I said, how about if I do this more instead of writing reports,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I can do this and set up a training program for the company.
Yeah.
Can I focus more on that? And he kind of said, let me think about it. And then the next week I went back in and I actually got a new office and a raise, and
Wow.
it worked out really well for me.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing in university, I would go into my classrooms and I'd look around and I'd always sit in the front of the classroom, and I'd find somebody who was writing away, like literally first day of class. And I'd say to them, I'm really terrible at taking notes and listening to the lecture at the same time. So if I try to take notes and listen, I will not learn anything and I won't have any notes. So, if I take you for a beer after class, can I have your notes? And, like, can we have this sort of partnership? And I had notes all the way through university. I have a BSc from the University of Victoria. I maybe got C's and D's in English. I got really good grades in my science classes. So I sort of balanced out, but that's with mild dyslexia, right? And that's based on the fact that I owned my dyslexia. But for someone
Yeah.
like my daughter, uh, if we didn't get her diagnosed early, she wouldn't have graduated, right? Like there's no way she would have finished school. So, and I remember when I was deciding to get her tested when she was in grade 1, friends and my parents, oh, don't give her a label. And I'm like, it's not a label. We're trying to figure out whether she has dyslexia or not. And
Yeah.
she does, right? So I think the biggest way to kind of deal with dyslexia is owning it.
Mm-hmm.
And just like any other issue, like alcoholism or you know, the best way to get over something is acknowledging it and
Mm-hmm.
owning it. And like you say, talking about it. So advocating for yourself and realizing, you know, all the good things about yourself,
Yeah.
using those good things. Like I knew I was good at communicating, so I told my boss that and it got me a raise, right? So using your good things and getting over the hurdle. So that's sort of the internal struggle. But the bigger issue with the Canadian government and the BC government is they don't recognize dyslexia as a disability. So the fact that they don't have funding in schools and K-12 schools for dyslexia, and absolutely no programs or supports for people to get tested or screened or whatever for dyslexia is a huge problem. These
Mm-hmm.
people, um, most disabilities, you can go to your GP, like, and like even with your disability, Brent, you know, you were diagnosed as a kid, you've never had to go back. Somebody with dyslexia, if they're diagnosed as a kid, like a psychoeduc assessment is only good for 5 years. So my daughter, who's 22, she's had 4 assessments,
Oh my.
costing $4,000 private assessments. Every
Wow.
single time she's had a school change, they want a new assessment.
That's
Yeah, it's crazy. So she started out, she graduated in 2019, right when COVID hit, and she had a scholarship to go to the United States. And it's better down there. They have more supports and more laws protecting people with dyslexia. So when she wrote her SAT or whatever, you know, they have that test in the United States called SAT.
I
I
think
can't
they are. Yeah.
what it was called, but she had to have a psych ed for that. And she did it in grade 10 or 11. And based on that, the university didn't require me to have another psych ed. So I was like, phew, okay. But 2020, we decided to bring her home because of COVID. Being down and across the border, it just wasn't any fun, especially as an athlete, because they were told they couldn't leave their rooms. And like everything was just crazy. Because so we brought her home and said, you know, we would like you to stay on this side of the border. And so she now plays, she's the captain of the University of Victoria women's soccer team.
Oh, nice.
But guess what? UVic wanted a new psych ed, even though she's had an IEP since she was very young, had 3 other psych eds, had accommodations at her university in Virginia. We had to pay for another $4,000 psych ed. To say they said exactly the same thing as the last 3. So we have to keep proving our disability again and again to get supports. So I mean, I got an email last night about a gentleman in his 40s saying, you know, I need to get accommodations at work. What do I do? Like, I'm like, you're gonna have to pay for that 4,000, I guess. But I mean, we can try to do it, figure it out together, and talk to your employer. But yeah, it's just very strange. And
It's like having to keep proving that you have a disability. It's
yeah,
like on the like a federal level, like a CPPD. Like they have to every 5 years they have to prove that they still have a disability.
yeah,
Why? Disability doesn't go away, but again, dyslexia is not recognized under that. There's so many
yeah,
changes that have to be made on that.
yeah. Also,
Yeah, I'm glad you're here to do that.
I lost my train of thought, but my daughter does get the disability tax credit.
Mhm.
But it was very, very hard to get. Like the psychologists basically think that people with dyslexia shouldn't be claiming the disability tax credit. And
Right.
I mean, she needs a GPS for her car. She needs, you know, there's lots of things that she needs based on her disability. Um, it's got her more supports in university, like it's made it easier. Like we paid for that $4,000 assessment, but then we found out that there's a federal we got money back because she has the disability tax. She qualifies for the DTC.
DTC, yeah.
Yeah, but again, we have to apply again this year, so we'll see if she gets
All those hurdles, they just keep on.
Yeah, and for someone who has trouble with reading and writing,
Yeah.
filling out a form, that's a huge hurdle. And nowhere to go to have someone help you fill out that form. I mean, I guess I could sit here and help others fill out forms, but I've been focusing my advocacy on trying to change the K-12 system is what I've been on. And next week, they're going to make an announcement about, I think it's the 16th that they're making the final announcement about how they're going to spend that $30 dollars that they have earmarked for dyslexia.
Oh, yes.
And so I've been very vocal about the fact that I'm concerned that that money, most of the money is going to go towards private interests rather than actually trying to fix the systemic changes, systemic problems within the system. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hear that all the time. There's so many different holes that need to be fixed in the system, and then all I hear from governments is, well, there's more to do, but rather than actually doing it now, like listen to the advocacy organizations, listen to self advocates, lived experience. I mean,
yeah,
we know what's best for our children or for ourselves or for our community, rather than other ones that are saying, well, yeah, this is what I'm hearing, so this is what you need to do. Well, no, like talk to the actual individuals because they
yeah,
know, better, right? And that's where the problem is. I'm not saying like there's organizations out there and they all mean well. They really do. But the thing is talking to some of the individuals who actually are going through the cycle of through the education system and through all the red tape, having to dig through all the red tape of all the bureaucracy of having to prove why they still have dyslexia. Like, what is it? Has it going to go away? I mean, magically, poof? No, it doesn't go away. And with their children, with dyslexia, or if they have autism or ADHD, whatever it may be, it needs to be recognized and actually give the tools to work with it. I can tell you a little story of, like, I used to work in the hospitality industry for years. I mean, because that's what I was used to doing many decades ago. And I was limited on what I could do. I was a door greeter, and that was awesome. I loved it until until they told me to start memorizing menus. Menus. Brent, you can do this. Oh yeah, yeah, I can do it. No, I said menus. Oh, what's this? Oh yeah, you need to memorize all our specials of the day.
yeah.
I had a huge problem. And for some reason, my mind blanked right out. It's like they're like, "Okay, are you not paying attention? Are you not grasping this?" And then the employer all of a sudden had a complete 360 change of attitude toward me. Okay, so why don't we throw you in the kitchen? Maybe do some prep work. My hand and eye coordination, I can't do it fast enough. Okay, throw you in doing dishwashing. You can do that, can you? And to me, it was like degraded down. Like, it was not that it was not helping and being in the service industry. I felt that I couldn't memorize and do things fast enough.
Yeah.
And then it was, yeah, it just always reminded me of when I was in school. Like, okay, well, let's just throw them into a different room. Here, you can study in a different room, segregate away.
Yeah,
And the first thing I thought was, and then one part hurt. It was like one place I was at, and then I heard them talking about me behind my back. That was the part, and I literally walked out. I just said, I'm done. And I thought my mom would have been so upset with me. She'd been like, "No, you don't do that." I had enough. I just walked away, and I never went back. And they still owed me money. I didn't even take it. I said, they phoned me. I go, keep it, keep it. Like, that's fine.
Yeah, I want
See,
to.
right away, Brent, when you said that, see, a dyslexic person has trouble memorizing stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
But like, if as a parent that's helped get accommodation for my youngest with memory issues her whole career, I would have said to my daughter, and that's the thing, she's had jobs and she's come home and said, "Oh, this happened today," and I said, "Go back and say this." So I would have said to you back then, go to them and say, "Well, can we write the specials on a chalkboard?"
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I can then say, "Oh, these are our specials today,"
Mm-hmm.
rather than you memorizing it, right?
Right.
Exactly. And
So that,
one thing that I tried doing was I said, well, can I write it on a piece of paper, or can you write it down? And then I'll take it in front of the person, and oh no, we actually do it that way because actually it makes it like you're reading from a script. And I went, but that's for me easier for me to learn, like it to work with that tool. And then I realized, okay, they're not being accommodating. And I thought, wow, like And that's kind of how how I started thinking, okay, like these little things kept standing and then they became a bigger thing, especially when I was going through it at the time. I thought, wow, if I'm going through this, what are other people going through? And then I started networking.
And I think, and my daughter has been through a few jobs, right? And what I, as a parent, I've said to her, well, who cares? Let's move on. Let's find someone, let's find somewhere else for you to work. Like, um, you know, her very first job was a huge, huge disaster. Um, uh, I don't want to say where it was because I don't want trouble with that. But, you know, my daughter came out of a meeting, her very first job, and she was just young, 14, where they had told a group of people things. And she has memory issues. So she emailed the person and said, "Can we take a phone call, please, with my dad so he can take notes for me?" And the lady got on the phone and reamed her out, basically saying, "We hired you as an adult. You don't bring your parent," you know, that kind of thing. And and in the initial interviews, she had totally said, "I have severe dyslexia, blah, 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 blah." And the senior boss got it and was very nice. But the person on the ground, like, I don't know whether she wasn't told or whatever, and was mean to her and then didn't give her any shifts. So I, you know, my poor daughter, if she didn't have anyone to support her, to help her through that, and that's why I advocate, is because I know that we are privileged. I know my daughter is privileged. What about the kid that's in foster care and doesn't have the parent that that can say, "Oh, well, that's them." You don't take that personally and move on. She got the same job at a different place a few months later, and they knew her better, knew from the community, and they knew about her dyslexia, and it was the best thing ever, you know.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a huge job balancing the system as a person with a disability. Um, um, and I guess my biggest thing is I really want people to take better recognition of the fact that dyslexia is a disability. You know,
exactly, because it is.
It's not a superpower. It's not I think part of why she's so great at soccer is because of her strengths. And dyslexics do tend to have a strength of perceptual reasoning. A lot of them become architects, like they can see that 3D exactly like sports. Being good at sports isn't just athleticism. Like it's not just being about being able to run fast or whatever. Like you have to, there's a thought process, right? You have to be able to see the play, follow the play. And I think because of the way dyslexia is, there are a lot of dyslexic athletes. It just the way you have to be able to think. However, just because you're really good at one thing doesn't mean that you're going to be good at everything, right? So, and the other problem I had at school was, well, look at her. She's got so many strengths. Why are you worried? And well, you can't get through school on your strengths. Like just a fast runner does, you know what I mean? That's not going to get her a job. That's not a life skill. You know, it's not a life skill. So reading is a fundamental life skill, really. I mean, it's maybe not on par with walking or talking or some of those other things, but it is pretty it's a pretty powerful and important communication skill, right?
Yeah, for when I was in school, I learned to touch type because I was actually faster typing than I was writing. And I got forced to a book over on top of my hands. Well, I mean, not literally on it. So I mean, I couldn't but it was close enough where I could not see the words that I was actually typing. So I had to memorize where the keys were. And I became faster and faster and faster. I was able to type up at the time 130 words a minute.
Wow.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, and but then I averaged it around 100 after, I mean, that was with errors. Like they said, just type as what you can and what you think it is, and boom, and yeah, it was like error, minus plus or minus, right? But yeah, about 100 words a minute, and I was able to keep up doing in class because I was not able to read the projectors. They had the overhead projectors at the time, right? So I had to sit closer in the front of the class. Well, they said, well, if we have they gave me a headset to put on. So what they were actually putting on there, it was actually reading it back to me. So I was actually listening, but then I was typing. So I was taking notes because well, they felt it was better for me. I felt the listening to it and typing was a distraction. So again, I was kind of like looking at, well, maybe there's somebody else in the class that was taking note taking faster. So I was comparing it to that, and then it was actually helping me as a tool to basically get through it faster, and then comparing my typing with it. So yeah, because they were blowing up the stuff, and it was good, I must say. I mean, yeah, bravo, right? But the problem is when they were blowing up the print, they were making it too big, so that I was losing track of where I was on a page, and then I was falling way behind, right? So
Yeah, those are some of the same problems that dyslexic people have is they, they'll have a hard time following on an overhead because they can't have their finger tracking or whatever. So yeah, I mean, we just need to make sure that in a universe, like in a classroom, that everyone's needs are being met. And it's very hard to develop a system that the needs of everybody, right? But we just always, the thing about it is we just always have to be changing it. You have to make sure that it's not static. So if there's a problem, there has to be a mechanism for bringing it up, like with the employer. Like Brent, you in your job, you should have had someone you could have gone to, like but by the same token, like I was telling you with my daughter, if they're going to be that terrible right out of the gate, maybe you don't even want to work there, right?
Well,
So
yeah. And I kind of, well, one thing I wanted to say too is I apologize for all my disruptions today. Just sometimes happens. But also too, like, I wanted to go back to what you were saying quite a bit earlier, Cathy. I have been following along, even though I've been interrupted a couple of times. You were saying when you had your employer that you went to your employer and said, maybe I can do this instead, kind of thing, right? And I think that's really, really important. I wanted to go back to that because that's kind of what I always felt that I had to do too when I was interviewing for jobs. I would always be very, very honest about what I could and could not do. I always thought I was doing a better service to myself if I was really honest about what I could do really well and what I couldn't do, right? And as long as I was the first one to address the white elephant in the room of my disability, and make people make the employer comfortable with that and let them know, this is my disability, but this is what I can do really well, and you don't need to really worry about my disability too much. And then they were fine, because I always felt that if I didn't say anything and I went away from the interview and the employer didn't know, then if the employer is going away with questions too, then they're not going to want to hire me, because they're going to be like all confused, going to say, well, I don't know if Neil can do the job, right? And getting back to Brent's point too, I'm kind of cramming 2 points in there, but you were talking a lot about stigma, about that they were telling you to memorize all this kind of stuff, and I wanted to go back to back at episode 10. I encourage people to go back to episode 10, go back to our watch list, episode 10, because that's when we had Michael Scott on, and the whole episode was about disability stigma, really, right? And that was a great episode. So I really want to encourage people to go back and watch that, because in that episode I actually do a deep dive into all the discrimination I faced as a student teacher. Remember, I tried to go to UBC and become a teacher. I was going to be an elementary teacher for grades 4 to 7. And as I explained in the episode, I had the faculty advisor and the classroom teacher. It was my last practic and my last big one. And for whatever reason, they joined heads, and they both decided right at the moment one that that I wasn't going to make it. They already just decided, amongst themselves, that this guy on crutches, he's not going to make it. So they just made it as hard as they possibly could, right? And same thing with the whole idea about they wanted you to memorize stuff. Like with me, one of the comments that I got was, if you can't, because with my cerebral palsy, I have really messy writing. So right off the bat, I knew that was going to be one of the hurdles for me, is that I had really messy writing, and for the blackboard, I knew it was going to be really messy, right? So, but I thought, no big deal. I'll just get one of the students that have really clean writing to write for me. And both teachers, the faculty advisor and the classroom teacher at the time, said, if you can't write on the blackboard, you shouldn't be a teacher.
Oh.
They're like point blank to my face, and they both said it like in unison. And I said, that's crazy. I said, why can't I just get a student to write up on the blackboard? You can't do that. If you can't write on the blackboard, you shouldn't be a teacher. And then, like, of course, I used to have crutches.
How long ago was this? Because
it was quite a while ago. Like, I'm 56 now, and I think I got out of that when I was 26. So we're talking like 30 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And nothing changed though.
That would be different now, because
I even got them saying, like, because I used to be on crutches, right? And I would be standing in front of the class with my crutches, and again they both said, you shouldn't be standing in front of the class with your bent legs, Neil. It looks awkward, like the kids don't know how to deal with it. I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe you don't know how to, maybe the truth is you don't know how to deal with it, right?
Exactly.
But it was just every little thing that I did or tried, they were like, no, you can't do it that way, you can't do it that way, can't do it that way. So
I think it's fair to say, I think the education system is one of the most rigid systems of all. I remember my sister applying. She took French immersion all the way through school. Dyslexia makes it hard to take second language, because if you're going to have a language-based learning disability in your own language, it's going to be twice as hard. I didn't do well with French. I don't have
Me
French.
neither.
But my sister applied to become a Air Canada stewardess or whatever, and at the time, my sister wasn't heavy, but she wasn't slim, and she didn't get the job. They said her French wasn't good enough, and now she designs software. Her French was good enough. My mother-in-law worked for Air Canada. I shouldn't have said that out loud, but my mother-in-law was a stewardess in a time when they signed a contract saying that you couldn't gain weight, you couldn't be married.
That was common. That was common, actually.
Oh, exactly. So
Yeah.
I think we may have come a little bit further from when you were in teachers college, but there's still, it's still
A lot more to learn on that.
Well, the reason why I know that it was just me getting into the system 2 or 3 years too early is that, you know, my first wife, she had a more severe disability than I did, and I mean, of course, I didn't know her. I didn't know her at the time when she went through, but she went through teacher training as well at SFU.
Oh yeah.
And we compared notes after I met her, and it just so happened that she went through a few years after I did, because she was younger. She was younger than I am, and so she went through the teacher program a few years after I did, and she got the support. She got a really good teacher and a really good advisor all the way through, and I mean, it makes a huge difference, right? And I just remember comparing notes with her, and I mean, like she was in a motorized wheelchair, and she couldn't raise her hands up, like her hands were fused, and so she was one of those teachers that did need students to help her write on the blackboard, and it was no big deal. Like no teacher was saying, oh, if you can't write on the blackboard, you shouldn't be teaching. You know, that was just nobody would ever say stuff like that, right?
Well, I go back to when I first said to my daughter, like, you don't need to work there, go somewhere else. You know, you have to have a pretty thick skin, I think, to get through unscathed with a disability, and realize that it's about them and not about you.
Exactly.
And so, to be successful, I think with anything, you need to just kind of take your lumps sometimes. And I'm not saying don't fight back,
Yeah.
but just go, yeah, okay, I'm out of here, you know, rather than dwelling on it, because I mean, really, do you want to waste your time fighting with them about it, right? Uh, there's better things to do, right? So, in terms of this, I agree with, you need to have the right employer or right teacher or whatever. And there's a lot of good teachers out there. My public, private, she had a lot of great teachers. That, okay, well, what do you need? What do you need? Or to me, what does she need? What does she need? And we got her through, and she graduated on the honor roll, and now she's in post-secondary. I don't know what's going to happen when she goes out into the real world, but you know, she's got a lot of confidence because we've worked through it together, right? So my worry is for the kids that don't have a parent or someone or don't have access to these great teachers that my daughter's had. Things need to change. I mean,
I didn't know. Did you want to go back? Did you want to circle back to the human rights case that you came across, or did we already kind of cover that? Or I didn't know if you wanted to go back to that.
Yeah, we already covered that. No.
Yeah. Did you want to cover that, or?
Well, the human rights case has not gone through the courts yet. It was just approved because of timeliness. But if you look through it, I mean, the child wasn't diagnosed in a timely fashion. They weren't okay. Brain plasticity reduces significantly after grade 3. So we want to be doing absolutely everything we can for kids with dyslexia and all kids before grade 3. So we want to be doing universal screening in our schools to flag all those kids that could potentially have learning disabilities so that we can give them the right interventions. And sometimes those interventions turn into remediations that may have to happen outside of the classroom. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like going for therapy for cerebral palsy. You don't do it in a mainstream classroom. You go to a special therapist.
They pull you out.
Yeah, right. And depending on what the problem is, the intensity might be more. Like people who break an arm or break a leg and they have to go to therapy, they might go every day for 5 days for 2 hours rather than 5 minutes, right? Like it's intense. Same with dyslexia. My daughter went to a remedial center in Coquitlam School District for 3 months. It was outside of her school. She worked on her reading and writing from 9 until 12. She went back to her home school. She had gym class and then resource, which was math. And she did that
Okay.
3 months, and her reading levels went up an entire year.
Oh, wow.
Entire year.
That's awesome.
That was her medicine. That was her therapy. So for me, that wasn't exclusionary. That's what was necessary for her disability, right? Like there's a distinction. So, anyways, the court case just absolutely highlights all the systemic issues. The kid was identified late, had to go to private school to get the help they needed. There's some underlying things about the case that I find kind of a little bit worrying. It says one type of therapy when there is no silver bullet for dyslexia. It's sort of, it would be like saying, oh, you have cerebral palsy, all you need to do is run every day. Like I'm over exaggerating, right? Everybody with cerebral palsy needs to run every day. I'm that
I want to do the run, Forrest, run.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like saying everyone needs housing. There you are. Like it's just
everybody needs housing. There you go. That'll be the fix all cure all, right? So that case mentions one type of therapy specifically, which I think is a problem. But it does show that the kid wasn't identified early. The parents had to pay for a private assessment. The parents then had to pay for private school because they couldn't get access. He wasn't actually getting help till grade 5 or 6. And like I said earlier, the brain plasticity goes down about grade 3. So your chances of actually doing the most remediation for that child have gone out the window. So I'm hoping that the case is won, and very pleased that it got approved. So maybe we should have another discussion once it goes to the courts.
I'd like to have you back, and once we get a more of a concrete resolution of what goes through the court system with that, just to find it. And then I can do a follow-up with you, and then you can let me know, touch base with me, and let me know that this is what came out of it, and I'll be like, Neil will get you back.
I always like following that kind of stuff because, of course,
me too.
I've been submitting my fair share of cases too. So,
we do have one landmark case, the Moore case, that how many years ago did it come out? 12 years ago.
Wow.
2000. Is it 2012? What is that? Is that 12 years ago?
It's 12 years ago.
12 years
That's
ago.
almost as much as the CRPD.
So
14.
The Moore case. So Rick Moore's son had severe dyslexia in the North Van system, and he filed 2 human rights complaints. One against the province and one against the school district. So the one against the province was a systemic complaint, all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. And he won both cases in BC, but then when it went to the Supreme Court of Canada, he won his own case against the school district, but didn't win the systemic one. So, which was disappointing. And what had happened there was the remedial center that the child was supposed to go to in grade 3 was closed down. So the parents ended up taking the kid to private school. He graduated. He's now a fireman. But again, when he graduated, he had trouble finding the right employer that would help him with his dyslexia, right? Like he, at the end of the day, instead of writing all his notes out from being sorry, he first started being a plumber. He did that for I don't know how long. And now he's a fireman and has his dream job. But writing notes and stuff after the jobs that he did, he used to go back to his office and the secretary would help him write out all his paperwork, right?
Well, I know.
So,
the tools, in order to succeed, right? Yeah.
yeah. So, he
Yeah.
went to private school, but he graduated and he was still dyslexic,
Yeah.
right? So, we still
Doesn't go-
face barriers, right? And if we have problems applying for the disability tax credit and stuff like that, it shows a lot about how much the system thinks about us and what we need. They really think it's not a big deal.
Or how
Oh, I
little
know.
they think about.
Yeah, how little they think about it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I always look at it, Cathy, as like the DTC. It should automatically go to every single disabled person, regardless on who they are, what type of disability that they have. Like there should be a no qualifications. You just get it automatically.
Yeah.
There should be no expiration date. You have a disability. It's not going away. Yeah, and to me, it's an ableism. It's ableist. Like as we say, like from provincial and federal thinking, like the policy makers who decide these things and say, well, like get rid of that red tape, all the bureaucracy, and let people live their life and give them the tools that they need to work with them the best way they can. And like there's someone that I know, now I'm going to try to get that person into the right in touch. Like we were talking off air there. It's a member of Sonia, to do it in the family. It's her nephew, right? Yeah, I mean, just to get the right paperwork, get the right paperwork going to recognize that, because again, the GPs don't recognize that person has that disability.
Yeah.
So getting the paperwork done and so they can get the help that he needs. Yeah.
Like for the first time we applied for the disability tax credit, I'll just sort of tell my story about my daughter originally.
Yeah.
So we pulled her out and put her in a private school in grade 3. And at that private school, I started hearing all these people were applying for the disability tax credit. So I went back to the psychologist who we went to the first time, and she didn't actually get a dyslexia diagnosis right away. The psychologist handed me my psych ed and said suspected dyslexia. And then he handed me a thing of papers, like a magazine, like photocopies, and said, she has dyslexia, but I don't want to label her just yet. So going back to the school with his psychoeducational assessment that didn't have a diagnosis, they wouldn't give me a designation. So no IEP, nothing. So that's what made me decide to go to private school, because it was like pulling teeth to try to get her an IEP. And then I find out I'm allowed to apply for the disability tax credit. So I phoned up the psychologist and I said, I want to apply for the disability tax credit. Can you help me? Yeah, sure. So he filled out the original forms and he wrote severe dyslexia. Then a couple months later, I find out that I was denied. And so I phone up the CRA and I say, well, what happened? Well, there was another form that went out. And I said, well, I didn't see the other form. And so then I get the other form sent to me, and there was maybe 6 questions on that form. It's a while ago. My daughter's 22. So she was like in grade 4 or 5. So it's a few years ago. And I haven't filled out the DTC lately. And this form says, does it take an inordinate amount of time to do homework? And I had spent since kindergarten, 3 hours a day trying, I'm exaggerating, but a lot of time doing homework with her, because everything that was done at school would come home to me. And so all of these questions, does it take an inordinate amount of time to do homework? The next question was, can they follow instructions? And I'm thinking, not written instructions. And sometimes because of her memory issues, even if for a long list of verbal instructions, No, sometimes she has trouble. But this psychologist had written like AAA, like she didn't have any problems at all, or BC. I can't remember whether A or
Yeah.
he said she didn't have any trouble doing homework. So I phoned him up. I said, "Why did you do that?" And he kind of was cagey about it. And then eventually he said, "I just don't agree with kids with dyslexia getting the disability tax credit."
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So then I went to my GP at one point and I was crying about a whole bunch of things. Anyways,
Yeah.
I was like, this is happening, and I can't even get the disability tax credit. They won't let, he goes, "Well, I can help you do that." I said, "Really? Okay." So I showed him the psych ed, and my daughter is in the second percentile for reading ability. Like, that's severe, right? If you're in the second percentile, that means that 98% of your peers are better than you. So I said, "Here it is. This is her diagnosis." And I'd also taken her to the doctor many times for stomach aches or whatever. So he helped me fill out the form. We had to go, long and short of it, we had to go all the way to tax court to get the DTC.
Wow.
And my doctor got hauled in. The first psychologist got hauled in. Like, it was a big deal. And but the reason I went that far is because I just thought it was so wrong about the psychologist just blankly saying, "No, we won't help you fill out the forms. No, you don't get that disability tax credit because your disability isn't bad enough." Right?
Yeah, well,
So,
it's funny. Like, I can share my story, and it kind of echoes what your experience is. The first thing I can say too is I don't know if they've changed the language now on the tax forms, but
yeah,
I remember reading way back in the day on the tax form. It made the language of the DTC was so strong. The way it was worded, I don't know if you remember, Brent, but the way it used to be worded, it was so incredibly strong. It was almost like, "Are you brain dead?" Like, it was almost to that level. Is like,
yeah,
you had to be brain dead in order to say, okay, now we'll let you qualify for it. It was really, really strong language. And so I remember reading it myself and going, wow, I don't know, like, it's so strong that it's going to basically disqualify everybody.
yeah,
But Neil, like it was like I had the same thing. When I got diagnosed from my GP for getting onto disability, provincial, and I had taken all the forms there, and he's going through it. He says, "I've known you, Brent, since you were just a little tiny little guy. I mean, you're like 6 months old." And I go, "So I know you, and I mean, but you know yourself better than I do. I mean, like physically, what you're capable of, but I know you physically, and so he's checking all my reflexes, like, oh, it always hurt. He got that little thing. It goes bang right on your, right on your knees and stuff. And oh man, he says, "Okay, and I go, why are you doing that?" He goes, "Because one of the questions here is how is the patient's reflexes, or do they feel anything?" And all this thing for DTC, because I took it to him because the government said, "Oh, take this to your doctor, get to apply for the DTC because you're disabled." Oh, it'll be no problem. I took it to my GP, Cathy, and my GP looks at it and says, "Okay, so provincial says you're disabled, but federal says these questions, Brent," it kind of exactly what you just mentioned, Neil. He goes, "Brent, I'm sorry, I can't fill this out. But you're apparently the federal, you're not disabled enough."
Yeah, well,
I'm like, what?
Well,
and I'm like, what?
Yeah, the part two of my thing. There's a part two. Is like I said. I think I remember reading the forms even before I was a taxpayer myself. I remember reading the forms when my parents would fill the forms, for taxes, and it was really strong language. But anyway, so it took until I was 33. It was my first wife. She was disabled, and I remember it was her first year of marriage, and she was watching me fill out the my tax forms. And she's kind of watching over my shoulders, going, why are you putting a check mark beside the DTC? And I said, well, my doctor says that I'm not disabled enough. Same thing. My doctor says, and for years and years and years, I had doctor or doctors that would say, "Oh, Neil, you're not disabled enough with cerebral palsy. Your cerebral palsy is like super mild. You're not disabled enough." And so I told my wife that, and of course, again, my wife's in a wheelchair, and she literally starts rolling on the floor laughing. Like, I mean, if you could go back in time and take a picture, I mean, it was hilarious. Like she just started like having a conniption fit, like laughing so hard. And she says that's ridiculous. She says, I'll take you to my doctor and she'll sign it in a heartbeat. And so that's what we did. So I actually didn't get my tax credit until I was 33 or 34. When I was married at 35 actually. So wow. It might have been before we were married. She was looking at, I forget, but anyway, it was around between the ages of 33 and 35. I finally got my tax credit because that same thing. I had doctors telling me, "Oh, that's not."
Well, every time I would file income tax, like I would do it, and then I was having some trouble trying to file this, so I'd have talked to Revenue Canada. I'd phone up CRA, and they're like, "Well, you keep checking off that you have persons with disability." I go, "Yeah, okay. Well, Brent, you need to get that DTC. You need to get your doctor to put it in there. You keep checking it off because I guess they would see it on their end." I go, "Well, I didn't know what to do. I mean, like, yeah." And unfortunately, they even admitted to me that there were strict guidelines that need to be met. And I went, "Oh," and they're like, "Unfortunately, things have to change going forward on that." And I could never get my GP to sign off on it. So, and I missed out on a lot of different opportunities when it came to the DTC.
Well, that's a systemic problem, right? If the psychologists and GPs are blanketly telling people, "Oh, you can't apply for the DTC." I think because they don't want to go to tax court, right? Like because at the other end is a CRA clerk that has no idea and is just like stamping yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And they rely on people not following through and going all the way to tax court. We were lucky that we got a lawyer to do it pro bono. We were lucky, all that stuff. And having the DTC by the time my daughter got to university was a huge advantage. It helped. The fact that we had the DTC made it easier for us to apply for that federal grant to get the money back for the psychoeducational assessment. And it just secures her spot in the disability center at the university as well. Some kids graduate from K to 12 and go to post-secondary, and the disability department says, "Nope, not for you." Wow. My daughter, because of the severity of her dyslexia, she needs speech to text, text to speech. So she needs a private room to take her exams because she can't be talking to her computer out loud in a room full of people writing an exam, right? And she takes double time because one of the things that comes with dyslexia is slow processing time, right? Yeah. So she gets double time. And it also does take longer to do speech to text when you're trying to do that on the computer, right? So UVic, the difference between the United States and the Canadian universities is huge. We were so excited to have her go to school in the States because as a Division I athlete too, because you get treated as a god, right? You're like a superhero for the university. So her first exam in Virginia, she's sitting there in her soccer uniform, and two people come with a wheelchair to take her to the disability department. Two people. And so she phones me and she's laughing. She said, "I don't know what I wrote on that form for this exam, but this is what happened, Mom." And I said, well, it won't happen again, right? And that's kind of funny. So fast forward, UVic, like, I went with her to all her meetings and they were trying to take stuff away left, right, and center. So the first Christmas time, she had 3 exams. One was a multiple choice.
Hmm.
One was, there was a reason why she didn't need the room because it may have been a multiple choice or whatever. So to make it easier for them, she said, well, I only need my room for the one exam.
Hmm.
And I think one was a take home, one was multiple choice, and one was full on exam. So she wrote to them and said, these are my exam dates. I only need the room for that one time. So their disability at University of Victoria's response was, well, then you can't have the room at all.
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
So forever, I've been telling my daughter, write down everything you need and don't waver on it. Don't say, oh, I don't need it this time, because you know what? They'll take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So I said, write them back. And this time I'm not mom, I'm Dyslexia BC. And you write back and say, I made a mistake. I need the room for all three.
Hmm.
So they changed it. And they wrote her back and said, well, we have a shortage on rooms. So if you ever tell us again that you don't need the room for the exams, then we'll take it away as one of your accommodations.
Oh.
So, there's all of these hoops, right? And that would not have happened.
Never ends. Yeah.
Right? Like it wouldn't have happened. Like they're like, you need something, we're going to give it to you. And I don't know if that's because the laws are different or the fact that she was a Division I athlete or whatever. Like she almost had, I was happy because her coach was on her side, right? Like,
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. So, but sports are different in Canada. Like she barely gets a scholarship. She barely gets anything of priority for having her disability and playing a sport. It's just ridiculous. So these
I
things.
remember many years ago I did track and field and I got a silver.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It was quite an achievement, right? It was just like, and you could just visualize that, that's the end where you need to get to. And it was just like around and not competing with all these other athletes. And I think I don't stand a hope in hell. I do not stand, and I thought to myself, why are you even doing this? And they're like, okay, are you all ready? And they made us eat like within a whole week, we could not eat anything that, oh, wouldn't that be nice to have something like that? Nope, we had to eat like plain milk, like skim milk, like rice. Oh, like yeah, it was terrible. Like crackers, no salt, no nothing in it. Like it was like very blah diet. But and I because to prep for all this stuff and but yeah, it was quite an achievement. Just saying, yeah, I can do this. I can. And it was always the can-do attitude. I've always had that in life going forward. But stumbling blocks, you just pick yourself up and keep going. But you can only go so far if the system has been set in a way where it's more ableist, and it's saying, well, hey, you can have this, but you can't have that. And that's the problem that
you know what else you can do, Brent?
What's that?
You can end the show now.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. This because it's been great having you on.
We've actually blown past time, so I just wanted to
and because it's such a great conversation that we're having, and I want to get you to come back on if you'd like as a follow-up.
For sure. I'll send you a letter I just sent to the government. Like I said, they're making their announcement about how they're going to spend that $30 million that they had earmarked for dyslexia. And I'm not confident that it's going to go to the right places, to be honest with you. So, and won't make the systemic changes that need to happen to ensure that our education system is inclusive to all learners. So,
and it needs to be inclusive. We're bringing the awareness of telling the government this has to be changed, not an option. It has to be changed where everyone needs to be included, and regardless on who they are. Nobody's left behind. And always that symbol. No one's left behind.
Or
Really?
nothing without us, without it, nothing.
Yeah.
What
Oh,
does that
I
say?
can never get that wording right.
Nothing about us. Nothing
I
about
always,
us
I always
without us.
bugger that one up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a dyslexic thing, not remembering
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
My one more last thing, funny. My aunt has dyslexia. And when they would do the nursery rhymes when they were little, my aunt would say, "Little Miss Muffet sat on a horse." And because dyslexics, like Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, they're never
Yeah.
going to remember a word that's made up or rhymes or anything else. They're going to give you the straight shooter version, right?
I
So
like that version better anyway.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. It's classic. It's good. I
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, well, I want to thank you so much, Cathy, for coming on. And I have a little bit of time away coming up. Actually, 10 days to go, actually. And I'm actually going from Vancouver to Toronto, going on train. So,
Nice.
yeah, I've been ever since I was a little kid. Last time I took the train that way, and I don't remember a lot of it because it's just a kid, but my dad lived out in Winnipeg, and so I would take the train out. My mom would haul us kids out there, and we'd go and see them. And so that's the last time I've actually taken the train ride. So all I remember is how fast the train was going through the prairies. But so it's been on my bucket list to do, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this and go in the off season, so it's cheaper, and also because I can get two for the price of one because of my disability, so it actually works out even better.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
Looking forward to it. It'd be fun.
Okay,
it's a long voyage.
Email me back and let me know, and I'll send you that letter that I just sent to the government Sunday night. So so you can have a look at it.
Yeah, I'll get also Neil to reach out to you on that, and you can maybe send it off to him too. And
sure.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
And thank you very much for coming on, and we'll have you on again very soon when I get back sometime, and sometime maybe later in May, or when you hear back from the other case too, we can do a follow-up on that too. Perfect. Great, thank you so much, Cathy.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in today. Thanks everyone. Oh, not sure. Still on here, so I'm not sure. I guess my guest left, and Neil will be back in a few minutes. So I know we're still live here. I thought we're actually had signed off. But yeah, just for anyone that's watching right now, yeah, I mean, you'll be heading on a little voyage soon, and the voyage is going to be going by train. Quite exciting. Looking forward to it. Just a little bit of time away, and it's been on my bucket list for a long time. A little bits here and there, try to save. I mean, it's really difficult to save, but you have to cut back where you can in order to make it happen. But I'm gonna do some a little bit of sightseeing around, and yeah, taking some time on that. So it's great. But Sylvia, one more. There's actually one more show coming up next week, next Monday, and then after that, there won't be any shows until later into May.
Brent, this is like a show within a show. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah. No, I was just describing. I was describing about the train trip, but I mean, you could probably edit that part out or whatever after.
Well, I mean, we haven't actually ended the show yet.
No. Oh, yeah. Well, the show is still going. I mean, it's still live. And Cathy,
I left my glasses on the. I tell you, this whole show today.
Yeah.
I have to apologize for everybody watching. I mean, it's one of those shows where I kept getting interrupted every and it's like.
Well, I thank the guests for coming on, and then I And I thought, okay, like, I guess like it was signed off, and I didn't even realize that so I went to go and look on the live feed while I'm actually doing that, sitting here, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we're still alive.
No,
And I'm
I
like,
know.
okay,
And
so then
yeah, so we're still live now, and this is going to be the weird. This is going to be the weirdest show on record. And I apologize. It's one of those things. Like, you can tell it's a live show because I do try to keep my space as a recording studio, right? But then other times there's other days where it just, it doesn't matter. Like, I get all kinds of interruptions, and it's just terrible.
Well, then I started talking. I basically had mentioned to our viewers, I mean, we're still live. And so I started mentioning, okay, well, thank the guests for coming on. And I'm like, oh, we're still live. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start talking about my train trip that's coming up. And then, 10 more days to go. And like I mentioned to our guest, Cathy, and she said, oh, well, that, it's exciting. And I'm like, yeah. And, as the time gets closer and closer, it's like, wow, okay, I got to make sure I don't forget anything, and kind of a to-do list. And later today, I'm going to be writing down a list and of course, it's one of those things like, you're going to write down a list, and then now you forget to write down on that list. So I'm going to do that later today. I'm going to be writing down things to make sure that I don't forget allergy medicine. It's allergy season for me right now. And I tell you, I got to make sure I do not forget that. Of course, I can always pick some up when I'm back east, but who knows, do I want to get suffered along the way? I mean, it's going to be a good voyage. I'm really looking forward to it. Been cutting back every month for several years now, and to save up for this. So I'm really looking forward to doing this. It's going to be fun. I mean, people are kind of watching, and I see Sonia just popped open the door over here. She's probably thinking, oh, what's going on here? Yeah, the show is actually ended, but she's still live, Sonia.
It's the show within the show today.
The guest is gone, but it's a show within a show.
We never do this. We never do this, by the way.
This is a very rare situation that this happens.
Here's another interruption. This is crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. One sec.
Mom's friend is here.
Oh, your mom's friend's here. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I'll just be there in a moment.
Can you come out and introduce yourself?
I will. We're just live right on the show, but I will be there in a few moments. Yeah. So, it's Sonia there. Her mother just came by her mother's been by to visit, and now her mother's friend just came by. And wow, I mean, a lot of chaos, a lot of things going on today with visitors upon visitors here. And
crazy,
her mother, like I say, her mother came by, and then I said to her mother, well, maybe you want to take a train ride? Oh, no. Her mother doesn't like trains. I said, you've been on a train? No, I haven't been on a train, and I'm not doing trains. I go, well, then how do you know you don't like a train ride if you haven't done a train ride? Because the movement, this and that. I go, well, I mean, but it's all good. I mean, I just wanted to let our listeners know. I mean, they're watching this, and I've been looking forward to this train trip. Last time I went on this train trip, I was 8 years old. Yeah, I was 8 years old, and so I mean, as a kid, I mean, I remember a few minor things here and there on it, but I remember trying to get on the train where the train had stopped, and we had a rock slide, and so they had to stop one train, and they had to bring another train in from back east, and they had to bus us from one area to another area, and the train would slow down, and I was so short I couldn't get on there, and this conductor is reaching his hand down, come on, yellow man, come on. And I said, I can't get up there. He said, you can. Pulls me up like this, and I'm like, huh? How did I get up here? He says I'm like the Incredible Hulk. I can pull up.
Wow, here I got the shirt.
Yeah.
I got all my superheroes on the shirt, including the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah. So I remember these neat little things, about it. So figured, hey, I want to do this neat little trip, and whoever that trip may take us on the voyage around, it's going to be neat. I'll try and do a little bit of break-in with Brent as I can. I'll do some footage. Probably gather up all the footage. People are kind of intrigued. Wow, hey, I may do a isolated break-in with Brent, and then but all the other footage, I'll be gathering it all up and then sending it to you, Neil. And it'd be neat. I'm hoping the weather's gonna be great.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. If it isn't, well, I just go with the floats. I can't change Mother Nature. So, but yeah, one more show to go next Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, a week.
It'll be good.
Week yesterday.
Good one too. It'll be the affordable housing question mark.
Yeah, and the question is, you know, and this is a prelude of affordable housing. Who is affordable to?
Affordable to? Yeah, millionaires.
Yeah, I mean, safer is just they're going to be getting a $430 one-time top-up and $110 a month. What about people with disabilities? I'm waiting on the minister, Honorable Ravi Kalon, to talk about that part. Maybe they can make an announcement. I know that we're looking at getting.
Right, we've tried to get him on a couple of times.
Yeah. So Ravi, if you're watching this, we really want to get you on. Reach out to Neil. Yeah, definitely. We'll get you on. I know that there's a transportation minister of state of infrastructure. Has reached out.
That'll be a good one.
Yeah, that'll be good, and he's for transportation too.
Yeah.
I know the minister itself, Rob Fleming, Honorable Rob Fleming, is in charge for transportation. But Dan Courtier, he's for the I think the Minister of State of Infrastructure. So almost when I heard transportation, so he does that same part. I nail him on about the transportation stuff. So because I mean accessibility is so important.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Anyway,
so
welcome to the show that never ends.
The show that never ends, everyone, and kind of a sneak peek of what's.
This is the show from the Twilight Zone today.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for watching.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show.
It was a fun one.
It was great. See you next.